Spoilers ahead.
Irreversible is a French film released in 2002, directed by Gaspar Noe, whose other movies include 2009's brilliant Enter the Void and 2018's divisive psychological horror Climax. The movie stars Monica Bellucci, Vincent Cassel, Albert Dupontel, and Joe Prestia, whose character in this movie makes the yellow bastard from Sin City look like Atticus Finch.
Irreversible is so vicious and nihilistic, for some people it is unwatchable. And for me personally, there's a scene in this movie that's been stuck in my head for over a decade. We'll get into that later. No matter what you think of the movie, it has had an undeniable effect on cinema. Today we're going to look at what makes this unwatchable for so many people. And then I'm going to explain why I believe those elements are necessary in order for this movie to convey its message. As per the title, this movie is told backwards.
In reverse, idiot.
As per the title, this movie is told in reverse, meaning the plot is a series of events just like any normal movie, only we start at the end and we finish at the beginning. And finally, if you're concerned about this movie's notorious graphic depictions of violence and intimate assault, rest assured, I will convey as much of the story as I can with a handful of strategically placed blurs and some creative script writing.
The movie opens at night in Paris when an ambulance has been called to a gay S&M club after an altercation inside. And outside the club, a man named Marcus, played by Vincent Cassel, is being taken out on a stretcher while his friend Pierre, played by Albert Dupontel, is being arrested. The next scene represents the previous scene in the movie's timeline. So if this opening scene takes place at midnight, the next scene might be happening at 11 p.m. We see a furious Marcus and hesitant Pierre entering the club to track down somebody known as Latenya, who's a suspected grapist. Marcus thinks he's found the man he's looking for, and the pair get into a fist fight. But Marcus is overcome by the man, who breaks his arm and attempts to dominate him further, shall we say. But Pierre intervenes at the last minute and beats the man to death with a fire extinguisher while everyone else watches on. As the movie continues, we find out Marcus and Pierre went to the club intentionally to find the man who violently raped Marcus's girlfriend Alex earlier that same night. And in the next scene, which is the previous scene, everybody's at a house party, and everybody seems to be having a brilliant time. And if they'd been considerate and thoughtful enough to invite me along to the party, I'm guessing I'd have had a brilliant time too, because I haven't been to a party since before the bullshit lockdowns. Next, we see Alex leaving the house party because she got fed up with Marcus's boorish behavior. And as she passes through an enclosed underpass, she sees a prostitute getting attacked by the man we saw earlier in the club. When the man realizes Alex has seen him, he turns his attention on her. And everything that happens next is caught in a single continuous stationary shot from very close up with full lighting and clarity, and it lasts nearly 11 minutes. And afterwards, Marcus and Pierre find Alex in a coma being taken away in an ambulance, so they speak to two known street criminals who help them track down who did it. The prostitute Alex inadvertently saved left their ID behind at the scene, so they're able to trace everything back to the man who attacked her, and this sets up what transpired back in the club earlier. In the later scenes of the film, which represent the beginning of the story in chronological terms, we see Alex, Pierre, and Marcus earlier that same day, and we learn Alex was originally with Pierre romantically but left him for Marcus. Apparently, Pierre wasn't up to par in terms of physical intimacy, and he's still having trouble getting over the idea. And finally, we learn Alex took a pregnancy test at the start of the day and it came back positive. And the story comes to an end with Alex reading a book in the park, oblivious to the tragic events about to unfold before her on what could have been an otherwise beautiful day. The screen morphs into an intense, disorienting strobe effect I can't show you here for safety reasons, and the words "Le temps détruit tout" appear on the screen. For those of you who took Spanish in school or weren't paying attention during French class, that means time destroys everything.
And there you have it, folks, a highly condensed summary of Irreversible's reversed plot. As I've said, a lot of people find this movie unwatchable, so we're going to take a look at both sides of the argument, and I will put my spin on it at the end.
The good bits.
In technical terms, this movie is proficient and you're shown proof of that immediately. The acting is stellar. The opening scene in the club's enough to put most people off the movie in the first few minutes. The camera work disorients you with floating, swirling long takes with handheld cameras at angles cameras weren't meant to be held at. The music, composed by Thomas from Daft Punk, unsettles your stomach and makes you paranoid and jittery and uneasy. As a horror fan, I'd describe the music as frightening. Here's a snippet. Try meditating to that. Between the score and the fluid camera work, you feel the chaos and you can smell the inside of the dark red halls. And that's all on purpose. It forces the tone of the club onto you as if you were stuck in there with them. But these details aren't the ones we're focusing on today. This movie's known for two things: its graphic, unflinching portrayal of the violent, real-world horrors of intimate assault, and its reverse plotline. Either of these things on their own might make the movie unwatchable even for me, but Gaspar Noé combined these elements with the intention of creating a very specific effect. Let's examine what would have happened if this story was told the right way around. Settle down, I'll be quick about it. We'd be introduced to a young, spirited couple who are clearly nuts about each other. Being a French film, it's very open about their physical intimacy, so we'd also be shown how comfortable and happy they are with each other at their most vulnerable. Later on, they'd head out to a party, and Alex dresses in a way that makes you wonder why she bothered putting anything on at all. That attracts the attention of everyone, to the extent some people might wonder how Marcus could possibly let his girlfriend head out in public like that. We might even suspect he enjoys her getting all the attention. We'd also find out Marcus's best friend Pierre used to date Alex and is hung up over the fact things didn't work out between them. And then we'd watch as Alex storms off alone into the dark subway tunnel where she's viciously attacked and assaulted by a local pimp. We'd probably think all the usual things like, this guy's a monster, how could somebody do this? And, if we're honest, we'd probably also think she shouldn't have drawn all that attention to herself dressing so provocatively. Then when Marcus and Pierre found out what happened to Alex, we'd expect them to do the right thing by tracking the guy down and doing what we'd claim we'd do in his situation, because that's how movies work. If they're done properly, we vicariously experience what the characters experience. If Irreversible wasn't played backwards, Alex would be the beautiful damsel in distress. If we're males watching that movie, we might imagine ourselves the knight on the white horse coming to save the day. And if we're female, we might imagine ourselves fighting off her attacker right alongside her, sharing her struggles, picturing what we'd do differently if we were her. And when Marcus and Pierre do track the culprit down, he's beaten brutally, and that's shown in the same glorious close-up, unflinching detail the original assault was. And that would be just fine with us because that kind of retaliatory violence is acceptable. It balances the equation. We would say justice had been served. Except for the minor detail they beat up the wrong guy. The real culprit was standing beside the man they beat to death. And we'll come back to this point later too.
If the movie had played out like that, it would be just another violent French film, and I would not be going through it with you today. I imagine some of you are thinking, and rightfully so, how does reversing the story change anything at all? Allow me to demonstrate.
As you all know, in a typical movie, the opening act sets up the story and introduces the main characters. The second act, or the middle, raises the stakes and culminates with the big confrontation. The third and final act resolves the story, and then we lock ourselves away in a quiet room and write a 2,500-word script about how the movie made us feel.
You all do that too, right?
By starting with both of these brutal scenes, you know these characters have been irreparably damaged, but they don't. And that makes you want to see where this all started. When we watch the couple's blissful morning together, it forces you to think about how close we all are to potential disaster. And that's why there is a solid, logical argument for the idea ignorance really is bliss. Another reason reversing the story changes your perception of it: when you see Alex at the party before she's attacked, you see her in a very different way than you would have the other way around. You know what's about to happen to her, and you know no matter what she's wearing or even how she's behaving, she does not deserve it. And you know that because you've actually seen what happens to her. It's not just a possibility, it's soon to be her reality. So those thoughts you might have had about her bringing this on herself go right out the window. And instead, you get protective. You see how defenseless she really is going to be against such a vicious assailant. And because you've heard her speaking passionately and intelligently and declaring her boundaries in no uncertain terms, and you've seen her punch and kick and bite and scream and struggle and struggle and struggle for over 10 minutes, you know she's not just another hot girl thrown into the movie for her looks. This girl is independent and she's a fighter. Backwards, this movie forces you to ponder how ugly intimate assault and violence really are for the entire runtime. The other way around, the way every other movie does it, violence and intimate assault become the payoff because you've been building towards it the whole story. They are the climax, and when you think of it that way, you can argue all the other movies have got it wrong. As for the graphic portrayal of these things, now that you understand Gaspar Noé is not glorifying or sexualizing violence or abuse, it follows logically the scenes themselves have to be ugly and cruel and upsetting, because they are ugly and cruel and upsetting things. Real fights are not a series of kung fu sounds and one-punch knockouts. And in real life, violence is sometimes so vile and messed up, you don't even fight the deserving person, as was demonstrated with Marcus attacking the wrong guy. And as for the victims of intimate assault, it goes without saying there's nothing sensual about it. What better way to demonstrate that than casting Monica Bellucci as Alex? She's primarily known for her on-screen ethereal beauty, and all of that ceases to exist the instant her attacker turns on her. Sugarcoating or lending an artistic style to these two controversial scenes would undo everything reversing the plot had done. I'm not saying it should make the opening of this movie any easier to watch, but I am saying it's the only way the movie can truly make its statement. And in my opinion, it's as important a statement as a movie can make.
The shite bits.
I've just spent a load of time explaining this movie's technical proficiency, so I won't be addressing the usual stuff in this shitebit section. Instead, I'm going to address why this movie isn't for everyone, and it's obvious. I mentioned earlier a scene in this movie has been stuck in my head for over 10 years. It's the scene that sets the tone for the whole movie, and I suspect it's the same scene that'll make most people turn the movie off early.
If you have a weak stomach for any reason, I am bound by YouTube's policy, so I won't be showing everything. But I am going to attempt to describe this scene to the best of my abilities without breaking any of the rules, so consider yourself warned.
For the people who wouldn't be inclined to attend these sorts of places, the club, aptly named The Rectum, is very close to hell on earth in terms of depravity and filth. After the music unsettles you and the red lighting disorients you completely, the fight kicks off with Marcus and the man he's mistakenly identified as the person he's looking for. And when Marcus ends up face down on the ground, his arm is snapped backwards at the elbow joint, just inches away from the camera. The realism is jarring, and that's coming from a self-proclaimed seasoned vet like myself. But the broken arm's only a catalyst for the really disturbing elements. When his attacker recognizes he's unable to defend himself, his face fills with excitement, and he starts undoing his zipper, as do other random onlookers. As a traditional male, I can say with absolute certainty what is about to happen here is deeply ingrained in some male DNA as being the worst possible thing that can ever happen to you.
And yes, I do mean that is a fate way, way, way worse than death. And if you feel differently, that's your business.
Fortunately, for anyone in the audience that shares my sentiment, Pierre's anger towards the man they believe assaulted Alex finally spills over and he intervenes just in time. And this is where the movie climbed inside my head without my permission. As Pierre smashes the man directly in the face the first time with a full fire extinguisher, it stuns him, but it also arouses him, as he'd inhaled a liquid stimulant just moments before the fight started. So he continues fiddling with himself for another 2 or 3 bashes until his cranium ultimately collapses and his jaw dislodges. When the man eventually stops moving, Pierre keeps going until there's nothing left to hit. It all happens right in front of you in full clarity. It is, hands down, the most realistic death scene I've seen in a fictional movie, and once it kicks off, the camera never looks away from it. And the onlookers show a complete indifference to watching a man's head reduced to a thick mass of blood and hair. It's sickening and savage and extreme because this is not the way Hollywood portrays violence. So when you combine all the individual elements of this scene with the carefully crafted music and the camera angles and the benches filled with semi-aroused, leather-clad clubgoers, the scene on the whole, pardon the pun, isn't something you watch. It's something you go through. And as a result of Gaspar Noé orchestrating the elements of this scene so meticulously, actor Joe Bristia's face still pops into my head from time to time all these years later, usually while I'm sleeping. So, should you watch Irreversible? Or should you maybe learn a lesson from your old pal Johnny and not risk having some of the imagery burnt into the back of your mind forever?
I am a cinephile, and I'm saying this by way of an explanation. The process of making movies fascinates me, from the casting to the script writing to the special effects to the friggin' marketing. I don't just see movies as entertainment. For me, they're an education in new cultures and new perspectives, and as such, I'm able to watch extreme movies like this because I'm always able to see the art in them. I do recognize that most people aren't like that, but if you're watching this channel, maybe you are too. Every scene we've talked about today is available to watch right here on YouTube if you decide you feel like dipping your toes into the seedy waters. And if you do check them out, or you check the movie out, please let me know what you thought. Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!